I hadn't read many books or articles about starting a business, but the few I had always seemed to regurgitate the same things. Have a plan, manage your expenses, know your customer and break-even point, and so on. What I couldn't understand was why none of them ever said to brace yourself for the shitstorm you were foolishly diving into. I had no plan beyond surviving to the next week, and I hadn't figured out what the monthly expenses would be or how many BDs I'd need to sell to keep the business afloat. But over the course of the last week, I'd learned one very important fact about myself. Crazy was the speed I worked best at. When I wasn't busy getting the studio into a presentable state, I'd think about the types of BDs I wanted to scroll. The possibilities were endless, which made it all the more frustrating that it was taking so long to plan them out. There shouldn't have been anyone better qualified to write smut than me, but I never appreciated how much time went into plotting a simple fuck. V had tossed a few ideas around with me, though it was difficult keeping her focused on work rather than trying to bring the scenes to life. Still, our apartment seemed livelier than it had been in a long time as we bantered and joked around the counter. My smut station, as V had taken to calling it. But my true smut station remained at Lizzie's. Susie was oddly absent, though I knew she was stopping by as I'd always find a fresh stack of shards waiting for me. At least I had yet to discover anything that made my stomach churn like before. I worked from dawn to the early hours of the following morning and could barely stand by the time I made it home. 16-hour days didn't agree with me, and despite the long hours I was putting in, I'd still find V passed out on the couch waiting for me to pull her to bed. Sleep was hard to come by, though. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find my mind racing over everything I needed to accomplish the next day. I don't know why that happened, since I wasn't about to rush out in the middle of the night and buy a prop or scribble something down at the counter. The day of reckoning finally arrived. It was Sunday morning, my day off, and I was hunched over my coffee reviewing the first batch of scripts I'd written. They were fairly vanilla, a handful of straight and gay scenes, none of which were too crazy, though I didn't think they needed to be. So much of a good BD wasn't just what was happening, but what wasn't happening. All the stray thoughts, the wandering eyes settling on a crack in the floor, the rumble of a building's HVAC system. Just filtering all of that crap out would make most scenes feel enhanced, even if they really weren't. V lumbered out of the bedroom, still dressed in her shirt and panties, and grabbed a coffee. Morning. I remained focused on my notes. Morning. It was only when I felt a faint rush of warm air against the back of my neck that I realized V was peeking over my shoulder. Pretty fucking hot, is it? I looked back at what I plotted. It was an oral scene between two men. Not something I was an expert on, even though I'd tuned hundreds of them over the years. V leaned closer and I shifted so she could get a better view. I think you got the right mix of teasing and action going on. Like you'd know, I laughed. I'm serious. If the dolls pull it off like you got written here, you'll be making guys blow their load all over the city. I was about to question why it only had to be guys who might want to watch it when I realized I was procrastinating. The studio was as good as it would get. I'd familiarized myself with the recording equipment, and I had scenes that were ready to scroll. All I needed were the dolls. You alright? I snapped out of my thoughts, wishing my heart wasn't pounding as hard as it was. Yeah, I just realized I'm really about to do this. Gotta call Roxanne and tell her and the others that it's time to walk out. V slapped me on the shoulder. Well, think of it this way. You already passed the point of no return when you signed the lease. Speaking of which, did you call that guy I told you about? Shit. I knew I'd forgotten something, and the worst part about forgetting was when you suddenly remembered what it was and couldn't stop yourself from reacting. Come on, Jude, this is important. I know. I'll call him today. You better, V lectured. I told River you were going to call him earlier this week. The guy's got preem connections in the security arena, but they're worthless if you're not going to do anything with them. I gritted my teeth but remained quiet, making a mental note to call this, River Ward later in the day. Considering how much V had hassled me over the last week to reach out to him, I hoped for her sake the former badge did have some preem connections. I pulled my hollow out and wiped the sweat off my hands before calling Roxanne. She was quick to answer. Hey, Judy. Morning, Roxanne. How's things? Same as always. You? I took a deep breath. Oh, you know, the usual. Just sitting around ready to hire some soon-to-be former dolls to come work for me. Wait, are you serious? Indeed I am, I grinned. Call the others. It's time to make your way to the island of misfit toys. Or rather, Alvarez Studios. Oh, holy shit. All right. Let me call Bruce and let him know. We can be there in an hour or so. Though it might take a little. Hey, Roxanne. Yeah. It might help if I give you some deets to pass along, like the address. Otherwise, how will you know where to go? Shit. You're right. I'm sorry. I just got a little excited. A little? Her screen was bouncing all over the place. Admittedly, her excitement was contagious, and I wanted to join in, but I kept my cool. I needed to project confidence, especially since, as of today, I was the new boss. Hey, I am too. So here's what I'm thinking. I got some scenes in a rough schedule I threw together. How about you and the others swing by around 11? We can get started? I was glad my voice remained steady, even as my eyes briefly flickered towards the liquor cabinet. As tempting as it was to take the edge off, I knew today was not one for me to be turning to the bottle. How would it look if I showed up at my own studio slurring my words and knocking shit over? Sounds good. Oh, Judy? Yeah? I know you mentioned the dolls will get a percentage of the BD sales. Roxanne's voice trailed off. Go on, I said, confused since I thought we'd already addressed Eddie's. Oh, well, it's just that a couple of the dolls are still worried about when we might see some Eddies come our way. We all got rent and bills to pay. A couple of the dolls were still worried, huh? Right. I was certain I knew who one of them was. Listen, Roxanne, nothing's changed. If we get a couple scrolls in today, I can edit them tomorrow at Lizzie's. It's not going to be like at Clouds where there's a steady paycheck all the time. We're getting out of this what we put in. Roxanne nodded and her face relaxed a little. I know. It's just a little scary is all. Yeah, you can say that again. Okay. It's just a little scary is all. Funny. I snorted. Go on and let Bruce know. I'll send the address your way. Give me a call if there's any problems, and make sure you pass along the word to everyone not to show up at Clouds. Claws are going to be fuming, and we don't want to give them an excuse to start shit. I will, Roxanne swallowed. A couple of the dolls are staying behind, though. I really hope they don't come after us. They won't, Roxanne. That's a promise. You, the others, you're not their slaves. You're employees who are moving on to something better. Yeah, I like that way of looking at it. All right, let me call Bruce. I guess I'll see you around 11. See you then. I let out a shaky breath as soon as the call ended. Just like V had said, there was no going back now. The dolls wouldn't be showing up for their shifts. Instead, they'd be swinging by my studio in a couple hours, looking to me for guidance. She sounded scared shitless. I glanced at V, who'd been eavesdropping from the couch. Can you blame her after what happened last time? The rest of the morning flew by. I kept checking the time on my holo, lamenting the inexorable creep towards 11. I cleaned myself up and opted for the most professional outfit I owned, which consisted of a pair of black jeans and a gray ribbed top that I used to wear when I went out to a club. The faint, noxious scent of cigarette smoke still clung to the fabric. Finally, when it was just past 10, I couldn't stand the suspense any longer and pushed myself away from the counter. I'm gonna head over there now and try to get things ready. Make sure I'm ready. V was toiling away on her holo. Take a bottle with you. What? She glanced up and pointed at the liquor cabinet. Take something with you. It'll lighten things up and help everyone chill out so it's not weird, which it's probably gonna be anyway if you're planning on having the dolls fuck today. I raised an eyebrow. It wasn't such a bad idea. After all, it would be past noon by the time we'd be ready to scroll anything, and no one was planning on getting hammered. Just like V had said, it would help relax things. I walked to the cabinet and considered my choices. Something about downing hard liquor with nothing to mix it in seemed excessive. I spotted a small bottle of white wine with a thick layer of dust covering it stuffed near the back. Is it any good? How would I know, Jude? Bottle's still sealed, see? It's gotta be good, V. Look here, 20% ABV. Shit's got some kick to it. Shit's got some kick to it, she says. Well, look at you. I thought I knew who you were, but it turns out you've been a closet wino all this time. A real connoisseur. Or what's that word they call someone who knows all that shit about wine? Come on, help me out here. You decided to go with all food's very best. Hey, stop spraying me. Stop. Not a chance. You bought yourself a cold shower from the sink, you gonk. Oh, what the hell, Judy? I'm fucking drenched. Huh. Afraid not, V. You're not even close to drenched yet. Come here, you. I carefully lifted the bottle out of the cabinet, making sure not to knock any others over. Wine. A mix of celebration and class, and the perfect odd pairing for the debut of a smut studio. After I threw my jacket and shoes on, I swiped my keys off the counter and stopped near the door. Gonna wish me luck? V smiled and gave me a wave. Good luck. Hopefully that was all I would need. I had to admit I'd done a damn good job of making the studio look professional. The ceiling remained exposed, and it would cost a small fortune to put one in, but the throws I'd bought did a great job of covering up the floor so the dolls wouldn't be bruising their joints. The lights and cameras were all set up in a corner next to a few pillows and blankets I'd tossed on the floor to resemble a bed. From the outside, it looked like a scene right out of a snuff BD, but I could see past that. Dimming the dull blue of the fabric covering the floor and lowering the brightness would give the set a dreamlike appearance. Changing the aperture would allow the dolls to pop out of the scene and to trick the viewer into thinking they were really there. And I could weed out any sounds or errant thoughts so that all that remained was a pristine scene I could easily tune up later. I checked the time and bit my lip with a mixture of excitement and nervousness just as I heard a car come to a stop outside. With one last deep breath, I straightened myself just as the door opened and Roxanne stepped inside. She seemed to study every inch of her surroundings as I stood there, anxiously awaiting her verdict. Holy shit. Was it that bad? Granted, I didn't have the eddies for all kinds of furniture and props, but most of that didn't matter to the viewer. What do you think? I asked nervously. It's preem. An enormous grin spread across Roxanne's face. I can't believe this is your place. I grinned. Our place. As Roxanne walked past me to continue her self-guided tour, the sound of another car drew my attention back to the door. A man who I recognized as Bruce entered, trailed closely by a woman I didn't know. Bruce was fairly short, but possessed a handsome face and a chiseled body that had to drive his clients wild. His blonde hair was combed neatly over the side of his head, obscuring most of the metallic implant on the side of his skull. Hey there, I greeted them. I'm Bruce, Roxanne's friend. This is Tiffany. I'm guessing you must be Judy. That's me. Glad you guys could make it. Bruce nodded and walked past me to say hello to Roxanne. It was awkward to be left alone with someone I'd never met and whom I would soon be directing through a sexual encounter. But I was intent on remaining professional, so I stepped closer and offered her my hand. It's good to meet you. I'm Judy. Tiffany took my hand and shook it. Tiffany, just like Bruce said. It's nice to meet you too. We were both unsure of what to say next. Judging from Tiffany's appearance, she had to be one of the best dolls at Clouds, if not in all of Night City. She was drop-dead gorgeous, with a head full of bombshell blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, and her voice possessed a raspy quality I'd heard in old movies. Can I ask you a question? Sure, I replied, grateful to have anything to talk about. What's the deal with the doll chips? Roxanne was saying we could leave them in or take them out. I nodded. That's right. It'll be your call. Obviously, without the program running like it does at Clouds, it'll limit what we can do in a scene. But if you don't want to remember anything, just stay chipped in. You'll never need to ask. Tiffany pursed her lips and looked over my shoulder towards Bruce. That's good to know. You, got any idea who I might be working with today? Right down to business. Good. I'd pulled up the schedule I'd created a couple of days earlier. Rather than trying to pair up actors and actresses, I'd simply listed the scenes in random order. There were so many questions I didn't know the answers to. Who was straight, gay, or bi? Who would be open to what kinds of fetishes, and so on. I'd been unable to plan anything out. It would be a delicate balancing act, trying to give everyone choice in what they did while making sure work got done. But I refused to arbitrarily pair people up or force them into something they didn't identify with. I'd feel like shit afterwards, and even if they were chipped in, I would still lose out on any natural chemistry that might be there. So, I didn't actually pair anyone up, I explained. I thought we might go over the scenes when everyone was here and just see what we wanted to do. It sounded like a shitty, half-baked plan as I recited it. What would happen if no one agreed, or if they soured on my scenes? Would I put my foot down? Would I even have the chance to before they all walked out and went back to Clouds? May I? Tiffany asked, holding out her hand. I raised my eyebrows, but handed my hollow over and watched as she browsed through the scenes I'd cobbled together. My anxiety spiked when her eyes settled on one. This one looks good. Hetero scene, mutual masturbation, oral foreplay, 69 cowgirl, covering all the bases. I could feel my cheeks turning red as Tiffany casually listed off the various tags for the scene in question. In a strange way, it was like I'd opened a window to my own proclivities. I'd spent enough time under the wreath and watched thousands of sexual escapades play out that I knew exactly what turned me on. The scenes had played out clearly in my imagination, but having one read back to me made it sound like I was some kind of pervert. But I caught myself before I drowned in self-doubt. After all, she said the scene looked good. Yeah? We could start there if you're comfortable with it, I offered. We just gotta wait for everyone else to show up so we can figure out who wants to do what. Tiffany handed my hollow bag to me and glanced over my shoulder again. No need to wait. Her eyes narrowed as she chewed on her lip. I'll do it with Bruce. Unchipped. Are you sure? I mean, I can go ask him if you want. No need. Tiffany grinned with a devilish glint in her eyes. He was eyeing my tits the whole drive over. You didn't see that bulge in his pants when he walked in? Now it was my turn to shoot a glance over my shoulder at Bruce, who was still talking with Roxanne. Sure enough, he had a raging hard-on. No, I said, turning back to Tiffany. Apparently, I somehow didn't see that. I still gotta ask him if he's okay with it, though. Everyone's got a choice here, and hey, Bruce, Roxanne shouted. You wanna fuck me? My eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. All this time, I thought I would need to pop open the bottle to try to spur some conversation. Tiffany had managed to cut through all of that with 4 simple words. Bruce seemed even more flabbergasted than I did. Okay. Tiffany giggled. It was an adorable sound. Anything else? I shook my head. Whatever self-doubt that had been plaguing me was gone. Maybe I'd simply been overthinking things. Huh. All right. I clapped my hands. Let's get to work. Even the best dust couldn't match the high I was on later in the evening as I rambled endlessly to V about my day. I could tell she was growing bored with it after a while, but she held her tongue as I relayed every detail of the day's events to her. I mean, sure, it was a little weird at first. The first time I had to interrupt and tell them to slow down and change positions, Jesus, I probably apologized more than a dozen fucking times. Really? That's more apologies than I've ever heard, V winked. They were complete professionals, though. It's like they weren't even dolls. More like professional porn stars. We finished 2 whole entire scenes. That's good. I kind of wish I was working a shift tonight so I could start editing them. Fuck. I know those scenes are going to be Nova once I can dive in and tune them up. V nodded, but her smile faltered, and I could see I'd struck a nerve. Had I been rambling for too long or been too excited? It wasn't like we only had a few minutes to catch up before one of us needed to run out. I was off for the night, and V had nothing lined up. Shit. I mean, I'm happy to be spending some time with you tonight, V. I hope so, V replied in a sad tone. It was one of our rare nights where we could spend some time together, and I'd been raving like a maniac, even throwing in that I wanted to leave and go to Lizzie's. Insensitive. That was how I'd been behaving. You want to do anything tonight? I asked. Your pick. V's eyes perked up. I don't know. Maybe we could catch up on the Bushido series? I think we left off on 4. Bushido, huh? Sure, why not? I think we watched 4, though. Isn't that the one where Jake tried to get vengeance for his slain wife, but the bad guy got away? Yeah, you're right. We're on 5. It's been a while since we watched one together. V was right. It had been a long time since we'd stayed inside and curled up together to watch a flick. Considering the day I'd had, a quiet, lazy night with some soft blankets and a trashy flick sounded like a slice of heaven. Sounds like a plan. Popcorn? It was like the sparkle had never left V's eyes. Hell yes. It didn't take long for me to throw on my loosest pair of pajamas and settle onto the couch next to V with a giant bowl of hot popcorn between us. It was relaxing, and exactly what we needed, though the movie itself was pretty lousy. The quality of the Bushido series had progressively gone downhill since the second one. I'd heard the 6th and 7th were better, but at the rate V and I were grinding through them, we probably wouldn't be caught up for years. I was sprawled out along the couch with a heavy blanket over me while V laid the opposite direction with her head resting in my lap. She'd recently taken to slapping my hand away so she could get to the last few kernels of popcorn jostling around inside the bowl, but I was content to let her have what she wanted. Instead, I raised the bottle of wine that had remained unopened all day and took another drink. Give me some, V muttered, not taking her eyes off the movie being projected against the far wall. Fuck that. If you're gonna hoard all the popcorn, then I'm keeping this bottle close by. Fine, V grumbled. A few more minutes passed before I realized V's breathing had grown heavy. I glanced down and saw she was passed out. I ran a hand through her hair and smiled to myself as I leaned back to enjoy, or at least watch the rest of the movie. The bottle grew lighter as I tried to focus on what was happening, but it was difficult to stay focused on the action. This was clearly the worst of the series by far. My mind soon drifted off. Even though I'd written 10 scenes, they weren't going to last for very long. The dolls would be swinging by tomorrow to scroll, and if today was any sign of how things would go, I'd need to come up with more scenes soon. And I still had to contend with my night job at Lizzie's. I couldn't edit anything until after I finished whatever crap Susie had left for me though, and I didn't think I'd need much time. Having full control of the scrolling process meant I'd filmed the right angles and kept the focus where it needed to be. Some AV work, the usual filtering, a little post-processing, and I'd have myself one hell of a preem BD. Everything was working out perfectly, except for those fucking doll chips. The second scene hadn't gone as easy as the first one between Bruce and Tiffany had. The doll, I think her name was Maxine, had insisted on staying chipped, which I was perfectly fine with. The first hint of a problem had been when Maxine didn't respond to my direction. The doll program at Clouds was remarkably sophisticated. It considered every piece of information the client provided and directed the doll to fulfill those needs in real time. But without the elaborate software running in the background, Maxine had been on autopilot, trying to respond to the actions of the other actor, but having nothing to work with. We'd finished the scroll and I knew I could make it work with some careful editing, but I needed to reprogram the chips so the dolls would have more autonomy. Another thing for the to-do list. My eyes were growing heavy by the time the flick ended. I glanced down and gave V a gentle nudge, startling her awake. Huh? It's over. What did you think? It was Nova, V replied. Fucking liar. You slept through half of it. V smiled and raised her head off my lap. As soon as she did, I felt the sudden urge to pee. I'm gonna get ready for bed, V announced as she stood. I grabbed my hollow off the table and looked at the remaining scenes. Writing would need to become a passion, so I didn't run out of things to scroll, as that was the one problem I absolutely could not afford to have. The dolls had only walked out of Clouds because of the promise of more eddies, not because of how terrible their work environment was. They'd be happy to have the claws peeping in on them, or perhaps more, if it paid well enough. If I couldn't keep up with things and make sure they were earning a better wage, then Alvarez Studios would quickly shutter its doors. But that wasn't a problem for tonight. I yawned as V emerged from the bathroom so we could trade places. For a moment, I considered putting the moves on her. She'd been remarkably supportive recently and had earned herself some fun under the sheets, but I was surprisingly relieved when I stepped back into the bedroom and found her lying in bed with her eyes barely open. We both had the same thing in mind. I turned off the lights and slid into bed next to her. V's body was warm as I slid into bed next to her, which made me snuggle closer. She pulled me close so that our faces were nearly pressing against one another. You need a stuffed animal, was all that came out of her. I closed my eyes and tried to clear my mind of all the work that lay ahead. Yet as tired as I was, V still fell asleep long before I did.